In our most recent war game, we refought a major battle between Guy and Saladin outside the walls of Acre. Fought on October 4th, 1189, this battle was even larger than Hatton just 2 years prior. To wargame such a large medieval engagement, friend of the channel Chris Grau volunteered to run Lion Rampant as a big battle game. We reviewed the original Lion Rampant, published by Osprey Games here on the channel years ago. It remains a popular skirmish game, and today Chris shares how he adapted the rules for larger battles. We'll also leave a link in the description to the free stuff section of Little Wars TV, where you can go and download the scenario as well as Chris's big battle notes. He documented every update and revision he made so that anyone can try this battle at home. Our thanks to Chris for running the game and for making everything available to our community for free. Now, on to the interview.
So hi, I'm Chris Grau. I'm also Feldgrau Productions. I have a small YouTube channel and a commissioned painting business as well. Mostly focusing on small scale historical figures, but I do a little bit of everything. I'm always someone who takes forever and tries to read every rule set possibly imaginable to find the perfect rule set. Originally I thought about taking Age of Hannibal, and someone refuses to write Age of Saladin. But, and then I looked at Days of Knights, which is kind of a medieval version of Age of Hannibal. I know the club has used in the past for Agincourt. Eventually, I try to look at rules that it would be kind of likely someone would know, because they're popular. That would be helpful. And even if someone doesn't know it, it's something that could be taught in 15 minutes. And the Rampant rules published by Osprey are pretty popular and well known, and there's, even if you know one Rampant game, you know a lot. So I kind of settled on Lion Rampant, which is a skirmish game. So I had to think about how to take what is fundamentally a skirmish game and make enough minor tweaks that it retains most of the core of what it is while turning it into a mass battle game. Well, I definitely wanted to change as little as possible, and so I tried to identify just a couple of key things. Whatever with Dragon Rampant worked at skirmish and as mass battle, don't touch those. Whatever really doesn't work at mass battle, I had to change. So in Lion Rampant, I keep calling it Dragon Rampant, in Lion Rampant, your units, which are supposed to represent 6 to 12 soldiers, they can move and change direction in any way. And that doesn't really work in a mass battle game where I have a base of figures that's supposed to represent a couple hundred men, right? They can't just turn on a dime and go the other way. So I had to start by saying, okay, units, by default, they can only move forward with a little bit of left or right sway. If they want to turn directions, they're going to sacrifice some of their movement so that movement felt more restrictive, like you really are wheeling and turning hundreds of men around the battlefield, while leaving the free movement for some of the lighter units like skirmishers and horse archers that really can turn almost on a dime. One other thing I changed with the movement is units being able to pass through each other. Again, in default, Lion Rampant units are not allowed to pass through each other, but they also move much more easily. So because my units can't, this is probably the biggest change I made to the rules, is that they can pass through each other, but then I added a mechanic where non-light units have to roll a morale test to see if they get disordered by doing that. And that's probably the only significant change. Lion Rampant also features in the back of the book a lot of optional rules, which are baked right in. So I used their flanking rule for that, which is very easy when you have rectangular bases to know what the flanking situation is. So in Lion Rampant, the command and control kind of comes down to two things. First is you're activating your units on a 2d6 roll and trying to roll above a target number based on what kind of unit. So knights are really good at charging, archers are good at shooting, things like that. That didn't really need to change. That worked very well. The other part of command and control was the leaders. Within a certain distance, they allow rerolls and they grant some courage bonuses. I did a little bit of playing around on like a 6x4 table. Acre ended up being a little bit bigger. I think by default it's a 12-inch range, and that ended up with, because I had 3 leaders on the battlefield representing the different wings of each army, 12 inches covered almost the entire battlefield. So I shrank that down to 8 inches, just so if you sent someone off on their own, they were kind of out of your range of ordering things. So that's how I adjusted command and control, but it was really a relatively small change. Lion Rampant uses casualty removal. The base Lion Rampant, you're supposed to have a unit of 12 guys. If one of them dies, you pick up one of the soldiers. Because I'm using multi-based figures that are multiple figures down on one base, I had to use these little tiny micro dice that you probably saw in the video to track casualties. The key thing being if you're above half health or if you're below half health, you lose some fighting power. And players are rolling 12 dice at full strength. And I thought that felt a little fiddly. It's like, oh, I have to keep track of all these little casualties and now I'm below half strength. So I thought about, well, is there a way that I can have players roll fewer dice, maybe an opposed dice roll, kind of like a Chipko or an Age of Hannibal thing, really kind of almost ripping out the combat portion of Dragon Rampant and replacing it. But at that point, it's really a different game. And I just said, you know what, even if it feels maybe a little fiddly for me, it keeps things a lot simpler to leave it as is. I think if you're trying to take rules you like and adjusting them in scales, try to identify the parts of the rules that work at a small scale becoming larger or vice versa. And then also try to identify what are the things where this rule doesn't make sense if I'm commanding 100 men instead of 10 men. Because the fewer changes you can make, the better. But also you don't want to leave rules in place which kind of break the fiction where if I have a unit of hundreds of knights, I don't want them turning on a dime. That will feel strange. So that is something I want to address, and you want to try to identify those sorts of rules if you're making tweaks.